Hey, what's up guys, and welcome to my 23rd Python 3 tutorial. So in this tutorial I'm going to be continuing off my last one, which was about file input and output. And so today I'm going to be showing you guys some more file input and output methods that are pretty useful. And these methods are easier to understand and learn in the writing mode for the file object. So first I'm just going to create a file object in a program and then write some code in that. And I already did that over here. So if you open up a new window, you can pretty much just copy down what I did here, and or you can create your own if you want. So what I did is I just created a file object, saved it as filemethods.txt in writing mode, and then I created this. I stored this string variable in my variable. I stored the string in my variable called string, and then wrote it to the file, and then closed the file, which remember is really important that you do that. And one thing before I run this, I just want to show you guys. After you can see after this new line escape sequence, or the new line sequence, sorry, I have this escape character, which is a backslash, and then this new line down here. And what this backslash here does is it allows you to continue on to the next line in a string without giving any problems, because if I didn't put that in, you can see it makes it all black. And the reason I did that is because if I just had it up here like this, or it would be like that, it'll just keep extending off to the right, and it's kind of tough to see all in one, and so it's just a lot easier to look at if you do it like this. So let's go ahead and save that. I saved mine as filemethods.py. Doesn't matter at all what you save yours as. And then F5 to run it. And so there you go. Now we've created that that text file. So let's open it in the Python shell. So it's filemethods.txt, and if you didn't save it as the same thing as I did, just make sure that you put in the correct file name. And alright, so there we go. Now we got an open, and we can print file.read. Oops. And you can see it will print everything out, and doesn't have the new line characters or new line sequences in or anything like that. So the first method that I want to show you is called the seek method, and this actually has to deal with that invisible cursor I was talking about in the last tutorial. So what it does, if you remember, after you open the file, it'll put the imaginary cursor right at the beginning, and then once you use the read method, it'll put it at the end. And then so if I try to use the read method again, it doesn't give me it doesn't print anything, because there's nothing here, because that's where the cursor is. So what you can do is you can use file.seek to set where the cursor is, and the parameter that goes in here is how many bytes from the beginning you want it to go. And so I can do 10 bytes, and then it'll move it 10 bytes over. And actually, when you're dealing with English characters, since I opened it in text mode, when you're dealing with English characters, each character is actually a byte, so this will move it 10 characters over. But there are certain character types, like Chinese characters, that can be multiple bytes. So the seek method actually won't move it how many characters over. But right now we're just dealing with English characters, so this makes it a lot easier. So now if I use the file, if I print out the file.read, you can see it printed from 10 characters in, which was after the G. So now let's go ahead and move it back to the beginning again, and you can do that just by putting 0. And something else I want to show you about the read method actually is there is an optional parameter, and this parameter is how many bytes you want it to read. So if I want it to read 30 bytes, you can see it reads from the beginning, and then it reads 30 bytes or characters, and to almost to the end of ever. And so you can keep doing it. You can go file.read 40, and because I'm not printing this, it'll show the new line sequence. Now another method that Python gives you is the tell method, and this actually all it does is it just tells you where the cursor is. and that can come in handy in case you want to set, like, if the if the cursor is at this point, then perform a certain action on it, something like that. Alright, so the next method, I'm going to go ahead and reset the cursor back to the beginning. And the next method is the read line method. And this does exactly what you think it would do. It reads the line. So I can keep going ahead and do file.readLine. It'll read the next line, and the next one, and the next one. So, I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory. So you can use that, and then once you use it at the end, it just, there's no lines left, so it'll just keep giving you that blank thing, as if you had done the file.read method at the end. So there's one last method I want to show you, and so I'm going to go ahead and reset this back to the beginning, and this is file.readLines. And what file.readLines does is it will return, it'll read all the lines and then return them in a list. And so what you can do is you can store that list in a variable, say x, and then so x equals file.readLines. Now you actually have to be careful, because readLine is just one, or readLine just reads one line, and readLines reads all of them, so make sure you don't get those confused. And then now if I print x, you can see what readLines does is it stores each line as a list element in the list. So the first line is the first one, and the second line, second, so on and so forth. What you can do with this is, even after you close the file, you can still access the lines, and you can access them. Let's say you want to get to the second line, or the third. Let's say you want to get to the third line, so you can print x, and then remember you use the square brackets to access list elements. x3, as is this one, which is actually the fourth line. Sorry about that. x3 will be the fourth line because they start off at 0, and so the list element that has 0 as its index will be this first line. Okay, so that's actually, one more thing I want to show you guys about the seek method, and that is there's actually a second optional parameter, and what that does is where you seek from. And so the default is at 0, which means you seek from the beginning, but you can also put in 1 or 2 as the second parameter. So if I put in 2 as the second parameter, it'll seek from the end. You can see it'll show you that it's at the end, because there's 114 total bytes in this list that we have. If you created a different, in the string that you have, and if you created a different string, that number will probably be different for you. And so pretty much what that does, let's say I do file.seek 0, so it puts it back in the beginning, and then I do file.seek 0 and then 2 as the second optional parameter, puts it at the end. So if I print file.read, it'll show you that it's at the end. Now pretty much what this does is it moves it to the end, because if you do file.seek, like if you tried 10 too, this would put it past the end, but you can't actually do non-zero end relative seeks, which pretty much means that seek, this first parameter has to be 0 when you're seeking from the end. And there's one other, there's not another parameter, it's still the same parameter, but if you put 1 in there, it'll seek it from the current position, but again, the same thing, you can't, so let's say I tried a negative number, negative like 29, okay, you can't do a non-zero cur relative seeks, and this cur is for cursor. So relative to the cursor, you have to do 0 again. And so pretty much what you're going to be doing with the seek, you're basically just going to be using as the default, which is 0, which seeks from the beginning, because then you can move to anywhere you want. So that's all I've got for this tutorial. Again, I showed you guys some different methods like seek method, tell, read line, read lines, and the optional parameter in read, which allows you to read however many bytes you want. So thank you for watching this tutorial, and I'll see you guys next time.